Hey everyone, welcome back to Brian's Mysteries and Adventures on Trail. And today's case, I'm sure a lot of you are probably aware of, but I wanted to talk about it. The main reason is because hiking and camping season is coming up, and I just want to educate people and try and hopefully prevent a situation like this from happening again. Now, this case happened almost 30 years ago. I think if it had happened in today's society with the technology that we have, it could have ended differently. Who's to say? It still remains one of the biggest mysteries that happened in Yosemite National Park. Now, this case takes us all the way back to July 9th of 1995 on the afternoon. This woman, I'm just going to use their first names, Jeannie and Mike, were from Massachusetts. They had been driving all the way across. They came from Fresno to Yosemite National Park, and then they came on to Glacier Point Road. Now, I'm going to have pictures, actual pictures of Glacier Point Road, the sides of the road, what it looks like if you were driving on it today, so that people don't complain and say that they don't understand, okay? I know that most of you are familiar with Yosemite National Park. For those that haven't been there, it is absolutely beyond impressive when you see how big some of these granite structures are, literally twice the size of the Empire State Building. So I want to give you some real feel for what this would be like if you were in this situation. Now, this picture coming up is of Glacier Point Road. It's a very small road. It's only used during the summer. It's closed during the winter because of snowfall, and it would just be unpassable. But this is what it looks like if you were driving on it. This is the sides of the road. So as you can see, it's very dense, very thick. It's also, on an angle. It's hilly. If you look at this next picture, this is showing you how it looks on the other side of the road. So as you can see, it's a very rugged and tough terrain. So if you stopped and tried to go somewhere, unless there was a pull-off zone, which generally looks like just a little dirt spot like this picture right here, these are what the little pull-offs look like in most national parks out in California. The couple arrived in Yosemite around 10 a.m. and that's when they started on Glacier Point Road. Now, they eventually stopped here at Summit Meadow. If you can see, this is kind of a close-up, but this is sort of a zoomed out version of it. It's just this really nice little meadow along the Glacier Point Road. It's not that big. If you were looking at a close-up, there's some wooden fences there on the side, but this is looking at the meadow, looking in on one side. It's just a beautiful meadow. I mean, that's really all it is. Now, this couple pulled over and they decided to both take short walks. One of them decided that they were going to go and try and go bird watching. That was Mike. He had binoculars and he thought he could maybe see some birds from this lookout point. The fiance decided that she was going to go look over at this other side of the meadow. Now, they agreed to come back and meet at the car at this, 10 minutes later. Well, when they got back to the car, Mike got back, but she wasn't there. So he thought, okay, well, maybe she just took more time. He waited around, started looking around. He asked a few people if they had seen her. They all said no. But come on, when you're in one of these national parks, especially for the first time, and you see how magnificent they are, you're not paying attention to the other tourists. You're looking at the beauty of the national park. Once he realized that no one had seen her, he immediately went and tried to find a ranger, which thankfully for him was only a few minutes down the road. Now, unfortunately, Jeannie was only wearing leather hiking boots, a t-shirt, and walking shorts. She didn't have any backpack or any type of gear. It was at roughly 12:30 p.m. when Mike drove down and got the rangers, and they were on scene within 45 minutes, which is usually a very good thing. Usually when the search starts is directly proportional to whether the person will be found, and this was an amazing response time. Within 2 hours, a helicopter was also there, and the following day, there were 8 different dog teams deployed. Now, this is where a lot of problems started with this case. And I wanted to show you some of these pictures with some of the search and rescue people actually in the woods searching, because usually they're only 4 or 5 feet apart. And when you look at how hard it is to see them just when they're that far apart, even with their orange vests, you can imagine how hard it would be to find a person that was just wearing a black t-shirt or whatever. So anyway, the helicopter had no luck. The dogs, unfortunately, they kept circling back. All the dog teams every single one of them kept circling back to the road. So the dog handlers kept telling the investigators, the main lead investigator on the team, that this was not a missing person case. It was more of a foul play case. So that caused a lot of problems, obviously. They immediately started pointing the finger at Mike and said that he must have had something to do with it. Now, this, of course, started a huge search and rescue grid operation that continued, and this was the largest in Yosemite history, involving hundreds of people over 40 square miles, including different firefighters, search and rescue teams all over the place. And actually, the FBI, who usually never gets involved, was called in because the handlers kept thinking it was foul play. They investigated Mike. They easily cleared him. I mean, he obviously had nothing to do with it. How could he have, and I feel terrible for him. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but the search and rescue was eventually, unfortunately, called off 2 weeks later, but it was a massive search effort at the time. I mean, it was unbelievable how much time and effort these people put into looking for her. And really, the only thing they found were a few things like an earring and some other things, but they couldn't match it to her. They didn't know whether it was hers or not. They did find footprints, one that was near where she was last seen and one that was near another popular hiking trail. Now, we're going to talk about this a little bit later in the video because it has some relevance, but not really. Of course, in any case like this, it's a living nightmare for the family, and I can't imagine what these people go through, and that's why I just hope that these videos will help to prevent some of these things from happening. We can learn from them. One of Jeannie's roommates called one of these renowned tracking schools, and she asked for a formal investigation to help them because they wanted to find out. They had basically at that point, unfortunately, assumed that Jeannie was probably deceased because it was a month later, but they wanted to obviously know. Now, you can see these search and rescue people, just another example, they're only a few feet apart and you can barely see them. I want to show you what it's like being out there and trying to look for people because it is very difficult. And I think a lot of people often misunderstand what goes into it. The family also got the FBI involved. They wanted the FBI to get more people involved in the search. And I did extensive research on this, and this family was talking to different, the Senator Kennedy, and it was a big deal. The roommate of Jeannie contacted this tracker school and she asked them for help. They eventually sent one of the students out in California that was working at this school, this case. He called Jeannie's roommate and he worked with her for hours trying to get a feel and get a profile to help understand her and hopefully find her. He called another tracker student who lived in the Yosemite area to help him with the case. The guy agreed. They checked out the area where Jeannie had disappeared. They didn't find any sign of her. They spoke with all the search and rescue personnel. They got all the information. They saw everything that they had seen. They got the Hopo maps of what the search and rescue people had done. Unfortunately, in this area, they discovered that there were a lot of aspen trees. And I know that might sound crazy, but it occurred to one of them that when the wind blew through the leaves, the noise sounded like cars. So they thought that a person that was lost might try and follow this noise towards the road. Unfortunately, in this type of situation, the road, if following that noise, would be taking the person away from the road. And now this was key to actually piecing together what happened. And this is actually unbelievable that these trackers were able to figure this out. But they tracked her all the way down past about 3 miles away. Now this is from the actual tracker's notes. Starting at the last point seen, he drew a 1 mile radius arc on the topo map in the direction of Jeannie's dominance. Now what dominance means is, from his interviews, it was fairly sure that she would be a right dominant person, meaning that she'd probably go in a circle in the right direction. Also, the areas to the left were so thoroughly searched by the other searchers, they kind of ruled that arc out. The arc crossed the Bridal Veil Trail, which is a very, very popular trail in the vicinity, and they did find a footprint that matched Jeannie's footprint that was also seen back where she was last seen. Now, they confused them because why wouldn't she use the trail once she found it? It's possible she crossed it in the middle of the night. And it's also possible that people, when you get lost and after even just 24 hours, people are usually scared, they're usually dehydrated, they're panicking. You have to put yourself in their shoes. And if you've ever been lost, just think about being lost in the middle of the woods in the middle of the night with, bears and all kinds of animals and not knowing where you are. The tracker student surmised that once Jeannie had crossed the trail into the Bridalveil watershed, she would have been there probably around dusk, and she would have begun to probably see glimpses of lights on the floor of Yosemite Valley, which she probably would have tried to go towards, which makes sense because that's what people often try and do. They make a beeline for lights or something that looks familiar. But unfortunately, to get down to Yosemite Valley, she would have had to descend through crazy rough terrain. I mean, I'll show you some pictures, but it would have been just a nightmare for her to do it without climbing gear or having a lot more gear. She had nothing with her at all. And remember, a lot of this movement was probably done at night. Now, unfortunately, she would eventually come to Bridalveil Creek, which in a normal year, it might look something like this, where, yeah, if you could find a spot, you could get across it. But this year, it was swollen just dangerously high because there was a huge snow runoff, so it looked like this. And trying to cross a creek like this without like an actual bridge or a log that's actually going over it is suicide. No matter where you would try and cross, I mean, you just get swept away. It's very, very dangerous. Walking on wet granite rocks, it's like walking on ice. So as per the tracker's note, he followed the course of the creek as shown on the topo map that he likely chose a spot for her to have attempted the crossing. He called the authorities, he gave them the coordinates, the elevation at the stream, where they would likely find her remains. This was, of course, all done by, at his desk. This was 1995. The internet was just starting. This was all done by hand and paper and a lot of work and effort. The investigators believed that there was no way Jeannie would have attempted to enter that area or even got there, and they just assumed that the tracker had simply chosen that area, the entire region, because it hadn't been searched, and they said, yeah, we just picked this area. But the student assured the authorities that this is an area where you're most likely to find her remains. Now, on September 3rd of 1995, two fishermen, they were out fishing and they actually found Jeannie's remains in a small pool in a river within a quarter mile of the student's estimation, of the tracker's estimation, even at the correct elevation. Now, they were fishing only 3/4 of a mile above Bridal Falls, which Bridal Falls, this where they found her, has got a 620-foot drop, and it was only 3 miles from where Jeannie disappeared. Of course, the National Park Service was immediately called in. A helicopter was dispatched to pick up the remains the very next day. But of course, since it had been in the water, it was very decomposed in a very bad state, and they had to identify her through dental records. And obviously, this was very tragic and very devastating for everybody involved. Now, the spokesman for the park said that the woman apparently was walking in a rugged area of the park where there are no trails and the creekside rocks are especially slippery. The creek was rushing faster than our other years because of the huge snowpack, unquote. Another Yosemite Park spokeswoman said, quote, investigators do not believe the body could have been carried to that spot by rushing waters because the creek is fairly choked with debris. Quote, end quote. The authorities then said they did not have a theory. However, they said they have no idea how the remains got to where they were. The investigators then said that the two trackers had just gotten lucky and that it was just pure luck and that they just really was just a random chance that they happened to pick that spot, which I couldn't believe. I mean, the fact that, yeah, they just happened to pick the exact a quarter of a mile away, the elevation. I don't know. I couldn't believe it when I read that about their response. And it was probably because they were embarrassed. I mean, they put a lot of work into it and they couldn't find her. And it's a very emotional thing. And yes, the National Park Service in Yosemite, it was the biggest search effort in history, so I can understand their frustration. But I also believe that these trackers put in an amazing effort, and they did an amazing amount of work to generate a location and to come within a quarter mile, even at the right elevation. That to me isn't just pure luck when you're in a park that's almost 800,000 acres. I mean, Yosemite is absolutely huge. So the point of this video is that we're coming into camping and hiking season. I want people to be safe. Stick together. If you're out on a trail together, stick together. Don't leave each other's side. Make sure you have proper gear. Wear a fanny pack. If you can, and your first time out, travel in group, hike in groups. Try and go with at least 3 to 4 people. And if you are out there, try and respect the signs. I mean, I think it's ironic anytime I'm in a national park and I see a sign, I see more people disobeying it than actually obeying it. And hey, yeah, everybody has free will. You guys can do whatever you want. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm just trying to help prevent more of these cases from happening. And my heart goes out to everybody that was involved in this case, and I just hope that they have been able to find peace. And if you do find yourself in a situation where you feel that you are lost, the best thing to do is stay put. The more that you move around, the harder it is generally for people to find you. That's why it's so important for you to leave detailed locations of where you're going to be, what time frame you're expected, the route you're planning on taking. These things can be lifesavers. And from what I read about Jeannie, she was an absolutely wonderful woman that helped anybody that she could. And I feel like by telling her story, if she could help one person, even just one person, by them hearing the story and helping prevent that from happening to them, it would make her happy. And I just feel for her entire family, and my thoughts and prayers go out to all of you, and wishing everybody a happy, safe, and fun camping and hiking season. And if you ever have any questions for me or want to meet me, I'm going to be driving across the country, stopping in many areas to investigate and talk to different people and go over different cases. Just send me a text or, a comment. I'll have my email back up. I actually just got a new address, so I'm going to be posting that. I want to thank everybody for watching, as always. Special thank you to co.ag for providing the background music, and I'll see you all on the next one. Take care. I know people don't like to hear my opinion, but oftentimes in these cases what happens is a person will just go off to use the restroom, and especially they had been driving for hours, so it makes sense that she would need to use the restroom. And this happens to people all the time. They get disoriented and then they lose their way. So it's very important to always have gear and supplies with you. One thing that a lot of hikers will put their pack down on the trail and then go into the forest to use the restroom. Well, if you get disoriented, then you're stuck because you have no gear. That's why I always recommend a fanny pack. And again, I'm not telling anybody what to do. I'm just offering advice and help to try and help everyone have a happy and safe hiking season and prevent these type of things from happening again. And thank you all for watching.